On this edition of This Old Bike, we're going to show you how to adjust the valves on this fairly new KTM 350 EXC-F. I've owned this bike for about a year, got about 4,300 miles on it. The manual says to check your valves on these KTMs every 30 hours. This will only be the third time I've checked the valves on this. The first two times, the valves did not need adjusting at all. If I need to adjust the valves this time, we'll turn this into a how to adjust the valves video. So the service intervals on these are not nearly as bad as the manual states, which is more for racing conditions, if you're just enjoying these things as a long-range adventure bike like I am. So let's take all this camping gear off, take the seat and the tank off, clean everything up real well underneath the tank before we open up the lid and see what we got for valve clearance. We'll be using the procedures in the manual, and the specs in the manual call for an intake valve clearance 0.1 to 0.15 millimeters, exhaust 0.13 to 0.18 millimeters. You can also find those numbers located right here on the frame. Remember, when you take your tank off at this disconnect fitting, quick disconnect fitting, to cover the ends of your lines with these fuel caps that came with your bike brand new. And while you're at it, you might as well replace the tiny little fuel filter located inside of here while you're at it. Now you can see why you want to get in here and clean all this up. You don't want any of this dirt dropping down inside of your work while you're working on it. Another reason to learn to do this yourself is it's very expensive, especially if you follow the service interval of every 30 hours having the valves checked at the shop. That's going to cost you at least an hour's worth of shop time just to check the valves, another 2 hours of shop time to adjust the valves. That's over $300 every time you do it. So it's not that hard to go ahead and learn to do it yourself. Besides, the shop doesn't always have the time to get all this good and clean in order to make the flat rate, so you can get the job done a little safer yourself sometimes, I think. And clean the bike, Pete. Okay, now we got her all cleaned up. We'll want to take this engine mount bracket off. The smog, I'm still running the stock smog equipment on here, getting 60 miles a gallon. Take this bracket off. When you pull this motor mount bracket, there's some little spacers in here you're going to want to keep track of. You may want to remove these throttle cables. Get these throttle cables good and clean so they're not dropping dirt into your project as well. You can remove the throttle cables right down here. That may help get this off as well. Now remove the vent hose, the spark plug wire, and the 1, 2, 3 10 millimeter valve cover bolts. The gasket should stay with the valve cover as it comes off, and this is part of the gasket. However, it may stay stuck to the head. And with all that off, the valve cover should just lift right off. It looks like the gasket, for the most part, is staying with the cover. You'll need to clear this vent tower, this plastic vent tower, when you take the cover off. Okay, now we can check out the inside of the 350 engine here. Pretty neat design. Allows it to really rev up over 12,000 RPM in some cases. A lot of great power out of this little engine. Great design. Here's the intake cams, intake, and exhaust cams over here. Spark plug hole, and this is what clamps down and holds the cams in place. This end of the cam, it's dual overhead cams. This side of the cam is a plain bearing. This side of the cam is a roller bearing. You can see in there. This black wheel here is an oil slinger. This little squirter is an oil squirter. And this little hairspring doofer is an automatic compression release on one of the exhaust valves to ease starting. Over here we have the chain and gears that run the cams. and the chain tensioner is located down here. Oil pressure keeps the chain tensioner tight against the timing chain. To adjust the valves, we'll be sliding the feeler gauge in from behind. To see if you've got top dead center, we're looking for these two marks here, and the two flat spots built into the side of the cams. To adjust that, you just drop it into a high gear, and I just move the wheel back and forth gently to get it at top dead center. And about there. If you want to lock the engine at top dead center, just forward of the brake pedal, look for this screw here and this big copper gasket. Pull that screw out, take the copper gasket off, gently screw that back in, and it'll engage the engine and lock it at top dead center. The valves themselves are located below the cams, and a cam follower, which pivots here, is what smashes down on the top of the valves and opens them up. To adjust the valves, you would have to replace those shims right there at the top of the valve. The shim's located inside a bucket at the top of the valves. So in order to do that, you'd have to remove this, the cams, the chain, and the works. And of course, in order to get the right clearance on the valves, you got to find the right shim. Pete, quiet on the set. And of course, in order to get the right clearance on the valves, you'll need to find the right shim to give you the correct clearance for the valve adjustment. The exhaust valve at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, basically a cold engine, 0.13 to 0.18 millimeters. Here's 0.13 millimeters. And it slides in real nice, just got a little bit of drag on it. 0.13 is the minimum clearance. Now valves tend to tighten up as they wear because the valves are hammering it back into the head generally. As the face of the valve wears, it's moving up and closing the gap and getting tighter. If you try the next size up, 0.15, well, you still barely get it in there. A little bit tighter. So these exhaust valves are in perfect shape. Check the top of your cams lobes for excessive wear or heat. The intake valve, cold engine, calls for 0.10 to 0.15 millimeters. So we'll start with 0.10 millimeters. See what we got. A little trickier to get behind the intake valves without. Good. Not too tight. Let's see if they're not too loose. So I guess no valve adjust video this time, just the valve check. Button this thing up and put it back into service. Torque the valve cover bolts down to a gentle 71 inch-pounds. Thoroughly clean your gasket and reinstall your valve cover. Retorque the engine brace to 24 foot-pounds. 1, 2, 3. Don't forget the little spacers. Put all your smog stuff back on if you still have it. This stuff is easily removed and can be run without it. Reinstall your fuel tank and boost pump wire, being careful to avoid binding your throttle cables on the right fuel tank mount up under there. So check for freedom of movement. Inside of here is that little tiny fuel filter, the stock fuel filter. It gets a little dark colored as it gets used think they recommend changing that every 15 hours. Could be every 30 hours. Pretty much everything on this bike is, according to the manual, is a 15-hour or 30-hour service. Double check the cleanliness of your fuel O-ring and the fuel fitting here and pop it back together. Just like that. And be sure and write everything down in your logbook. Put everything back together, fire it up, ops check it, check for leaks, reinstall the camping gear, and go back on the road to adventure. You just saved yourself about $100 checking that yourself. And if you have to adjust your valves, you're going to end up saving yourself about $300.